Hey scavengers and soldiers, this is Imp from Black Talon Gaming, and I want to welcome you back to yet another Fallout 4 survival guide. Today we're going to be covering sustenance and food in Fallout 4. Before we begin, I'm going to make one little caveat so that you don't expect too much from this video. I'm going to be covering mostly the vegetables that can be grown in your settlements, as well as boxed food items, more the most common boxed food items that can be found in the wasteland. I'm not going to be covering hunting or the meats and the various cooking, because I think that requires a whole nother video in and of itself and how best to utilize that. With that being said, traditionally speaking, when I'm playing, I eat the vegetables or the boxed food items first, and then after my hunger is sated, then I eat a special meat or whatever for whatever its abilities. I only eat meat to recover hunger if I have absolutely no other choice. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started by describing the various levels of hunger. Alright guys, so at the first or most extreme level, I am currently starving, and as you can see right there, right now I'm like incredibly weary from sleep, and my character is also starving at the same time, so I have roughly 25% of my action points left. I want to say that starving, right now it's only weary and sleep, so I want to say starving does about the same amount of action point damage, or generates the same amount of fatigue as being severely dehydrated. And let's go ahead and take a look at what it actually does to our stats. So if we take a look, we see that starving, once again, ignore everything else, but right here at starving does -5 to charisma, -10 to endurance, and -3 to luck, as well as periodic damage. So we can see right off the bat there that your ability to command and influence people is reduced by charisma. So largely this is going to affect your ability to barter. It's going to affect settlement things. It's going to affect your ability to persuade people in dialogue. However, it's not going to affect your combat really at all. I can't recall any specific thing combat related that utilizes charisma either directly or indirectly. Luck, once again, it's the same. It seems to be the same progression track as with dehydration, only instead of perception it's charisma damage, and instead of intelligence it's endurance damage, but the luck damage seems to remain the same. So that's going to affect your ability to score critical hits, and the rate at which critical hits generate, and possibly their damage. And then the big one is, of course, endurance 10, and this is huge because intelligence -10 in with dehydration would largely affect you out of combat. Endurance -10 is going to affect you in combat, because that informs how many hit points you have. So like right now, I would imagine my hit points are 493, and yeah, we'll see, 493 out of 493. When I get rid of these, I think we should see my hit points go up, up and up and up. And if not, then I'm not exactly sure what endurance does in that case. Like, I do know that when you take endurance, you get hit points from it. So I can only imagine if you have a negative malus to endurance, that your hit points should be going down. So let's watch that number. That's 493 right now, and let's see where it goes. Let me go ahead, and I'm going to do this all in time so that we can see the changes happening in so this way it won't take as long. Let's go ahead and go down. Let's see what kind of food I have. Alright, so I'm ravenous now. Right, as you can see, my hit points went up from 497 to 577 or so. So definitely it affects your capacity, it affects your hit points, so it's going to have a huge impact on combat. Same thing as dehydration, perception, or at ravenous stage, I'm going to have a huge malus to charisma, I'm going to have a huge malus to endurance, and a -2 to luck. I'm willing to bet at the next stage my endurance is going to be -4, my charisma is going to be -3, my luck is going to be -1. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And once again, like usual, my action point pool has a huge detriment, a huge malus to it right now. let's go ahead and pop some more foods. Alright, so I'm famished. Once again, my hit points jumped. I've got -3 charisma, -4 endurance, and -1 luck, just like I predicted. Because once again, these, you know, the malices, the way that they track is pretty much the same as dehydration. So let's go ahead and do a couple more. Alright, I'm now hungry. I am a -1 to charisma, -2 to endurance. My hit points are at 829. And let's see if we can do a little bit more. Alright, so I am peckish. And peckish is only -1 to endurance. Once again, I have a buff out addiction right now, so I've also got another -1 to endurance. So my hit points are at 871. I imagine that if I got rid of both of those, my hit points are going to be close to about 1,000. But, you know, that's not what we're not specifically here to watch the hit points. I just want to make sure that you know that your hit points do go down as you are hungry. So that's going to have a huge effect on your ability in combat. Specifically, you're going to die quicker, you know. Alright, let's go ahead and get rid of peckish. And to do that, I'm going to use 1 pot of meat. There we go. Alright, so peckish has gone away, and my hit points are at 913, 881 out of 913. I still have a buff out addiction, so that's, you know, a little bit lower than it would normally be. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So you can pretty much see that the malices are affected or spread about pretty evenly, kind of the same way that dehydration was. I would say dehydration really stacks and really hits your ability to use VATS, whereas you know, just being hungry, being famished, being ravenous or whatnot, that just really doesn't affect your combat at all, with the exception that you'll die much quicker. You know what I'm saying? So that doesn't affect it much at all, except for that you'll die really quick. Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. Is like, that's a huge effect on combat, but otherwise the other effects are pretty much negated, pretty much limited. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the basic items for curing your hunger and restoring sustenance to your character. Alright guys, so the first grouping, and I'm going to divide this into 3 groupings because in my research I found some things behaved pretty much the same no matter what, and I was able to divide the categories for these food items into 3 main groups. The first group we're going to touch on is food and vegetable matter that's either harvested from your settlement farms or found in the wild. For example, wild mute fruit, which is right there. These all operate exactly the same in that it takes 2 units of them to move you from peckish to completely sated. So I mean, it's fairly interesting to note that they operate all the same, though they do operate different on the settlement level. For example, mute fruit trees provide 1 full sustenance for a settler, whereas it would take 2 potato plants or 2 silt bean or 2 melon plants in order to provide the same amount of food for your settlement that a mute fruit plant provides. Mute fruit plants, all these, like I said, all of these, it takes 2 of them in order to restore just 1 bit of just, you know, from peckish to hungry. The biggest difference in them is that there are different weights. I believe the melon is literally a pound, whereas a mute fruit is 1/10 of a pound. I think everything but the melon is 1/10 of a pound. So the melon is, like, right off the bat, just not a good choice if you're going to carry vegetables around with you. If I were to give you a recommendation, it's always going to be the mute fruit, because it's much easier to start up a settlement, you know, with mute fruit. Settlements supported by mute fruit crops are going to take up less space. You know, you're going to have more space for different other constructions. The mute fruit itself is fairly light, not hard to carry around, stuff like that. If I were to say the only real reason that I keep other vegetables is I keep potatoes and corn, pretty normally in some of my settlements, and that is simply so that if with potato, corn, mute fruit, and purified water, you can make vegetable starch. And vegetable starch is, of course, worth 5 adhesive, so that's a big impact. But anyway, that's it. That's it for yeah, crops that you can grow or find in the wild. Alright guys, so for my second grouping, we're going to be talking about regular boxed items, and this is going to be a really interesting bit. Actually, it's not going to be interesting at all, but it's important to know. So we have Dandy Boy apples, we have pork and beans, we have Blanco macaroni and cheese, we have some sugar bombs, and potato crisps. All of these items function exactly the same, and in that they function exactly the same as vegetables as well, in that 2 of them will move you from peckish to fully sated. 2 of them will move you from one level of hunger to the next. They're no special qualities. You don't use them for crafting. The only really good thing about them is that if you find some in the wild and you're starting up a new settlement, especially at lower levels, if you don't have the capacity to immediately lay down some mute fruit plants or some corn or what have you, you can put these in your workshop, and the settlers will consume these, you know, instead of getting unhappy or whatnot. As soon as these items run out, of course, the settlers will start getting unhappy and start complaining and everything like that, which they should, because they're out of food. So yeah, these can be used as an emergency food source. Another caveat: all vegetables that are grown, all food items that you find out in the world, you want to keep those in separate stocked storage locations, because if they are in your if they are in your workshop, they will count towards your settlement for the purposes of determining how often your settlement gets attacked. So it's always in your benefit to keep them out of the workshop and in a separate storage container, and then put them in there when you need them. For example, if you have, for whatever reason, less food being produced 1 month, which doesn't happen in game, but I'm just saying. Anyhow, these perform exactly the same as vegetables, in that 2 of them will move you from one stage of hunger to the next. Almost all of them weigh a half a pound. I do believe the pork and beans weighs a tenth of a pound, or no, it's Fancy Lad snack cakes. Fancy Lad snack cakes weigh a tenth of a pound, and they do exactly the same. So if you're looking for economy in terms of traveling, you can fit more Fancy Lad snack cakes than you can fit pork and beans and sugar bombs and all that. And you know, as a result, your Fancy Lads will go a lot further than anything else. But yeah, so that's the second group. Alright guys, as you can see, the third group is going to be your cram and potted meat. Anything else that kind of falls in this, I think Lakowski's special meat will probably fit in here, because it's essentially just a flavored vanilla meat or something like that. But your cram and your potted meat are going to take you from peckish to full, or from any one stage of hunger to the next stage of hunger with only 1 consumption. So I mean, that's a big deal. And cram and potted meat, they only cost they only weigh half of a pound. So in terms of the economy of carrying, like, cram and potted meat are up there with Fancy Lad's snack cakes in terms of, you know, how much weight you have to carry to keep yourself sustained for so many days. The only other benefit to them is, just like with the other consumable items, they can be put in your workshop and your settlers will consume them instead of starving to death. So that's always good. There's really nothing else I can say about these. That's pretty much all I've got. Like I said, I'm going to be covering hunted foods and cooking and all that good jazz in another section. I'm going to be covering noodle cups and kind of special foods that do a little bit more double duty in another video as well. If you have any questions about your basic vegetables that can be grown at your settlements, or boxed food items that you can find in the world, please leave them in the comment section below. If you know of a food item that I forgot to mention, please mention it so that I can make an update to this video. I have no problem doing that. I want to thank you for watching. Please click like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time, and stay awesome.